Time for something kinda different. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Tales SkyPatrol, an originally Japan exclusive game actually. If I recall, we didn't get this until Sonic Adventure DX, maybe one of the collections. And it's a spin-off in the basic term of the word, because we're not playing as Sonic, obviously, we're playing as Tails. And it's not a platformer, the closest thing I can compare it to is an on-rail shooter, similarly to Gradius. Only your goal is to get crystals in order to get points, hit bells for checkpoints, and just try to make it to the end of the level. The way you move around is obviously flying, and you can hold back to slow down or forward to accelerate. But the big gimmick is actually the ring that Tails has around him. If you first off, pressing the 1 or 2 buttons will shoot it out like a normal attack, and holding them will cause it to spin around you so it doesn't hook onto anything like this. And that's basically your main gimmick, flying around and using the ring to hook onto things. Anything it touches can almost always be hooked onto. However, as an on-rail kind of flying simulator sort of game, I guess this game's genre is really hard to peg down. If you touch the floor, or the walls, and possibly even the ceiling, you're dead. That is the main point of the, what's it called? Point, admittedly, is to get 1-ups, but beyond that, that's about it. An extra little gimmick, though, is that your flight isn't unlimited. You can look in the top left and see your flight meter. If that runs out, you fall down and die. You can restore that with the candies we've been seeing, though, and I just collected an invincibility power-up, which doesn't really last horribly long, as you can see. Either way, in terms of this game's story, obviously you saw the little intro sequence there, but it's pretty vague all the same. The witch that we saw there is Wendy Witchcart, the main antagonist. Basically, Tails finds her on the island one day, and that witch announces, according to the manual at least, that she's claiming the entire island for herself, then threatens to turn any dissenters into crystals, which are what those crystals you can find are. And she sends out her main badniks and her generals, really, to take over certain areas. And that training area was just to kind of get you used to the controls, even though they don't really tell you how the game works at all. Now, there is one thing about this game. While we have a flight meter that is sort of our health/time limit, we actually don't have a health bar. If you get hit, you just slowly fall down to the ground, as you can see when I got hit a bit earlier, and you start spiraling down. You can mash the buttons, I think particularly 1 and 2, to get out of that, but that does eat up your flight meter, so watch out for that. Either way, first real stage here is Rail Canyon. That name sounds retroactively familiar. And really, this is where they start introducing you to a lot of the other little things you can hook onto. A couple of weights, balloons that make you float upwards. For the most part, this game is just that, using those gimmicks to get around the walls and stage designs. Though I'll say for a fact, this game is one of those ones that can either be very brutally hard or extremely easy, depending on the kind of player you are. If you're someone that likes to take their time like me and not hold forward, then you should have a pretty simple time. If you decide to hold to the right all the time and constantly be accelerating forward, you might die a lot. Call it a hunch. Now, for the most part, you don't really need to collect the crystals. It sounds like you should based off the story, but all they're there for is points. At the end of every stage, your points get tallied up, a certain amount for beating a stage, or a certain amount for beating a certain stage, rather. And then 1,000 points for every single crystal. That's the little recover move I talked about earlier, by the way. And you do get extra lives from points. I think it's every 10,000. I think you get your first one at 10,000, and then I think it's 30,000 after that or something. It's a bit vague, because the thing is about this game is that aside from Sonic Adventure DX, it's never had an official English release. And even in Sonic Adventure DX, where they have all the Game Gear game manuals, the manual's in Japanese. But you know, cool that they actually gave that to us, but still. And here are some switches. You can flick them, just have the ring float over them. In which case, they'll open up this door. Or those 2 doors, rather. Honestly, though, the main goal of the game is, as usual for video games, go through the stage without dying and make it to the boss fight. And the boss fights in this game are, let's say, underwhelming. Admittedly, something that's kind of subtle about the game that I'm not entirely sure about is that they seem to introduce more enemies as you go along. Like, this introduces the balloon enemies that if you destroy the bottom half, you can grab the balloon. But I'm not entirely sure if that's true, because the thing is about the stages in this game is that there are a good amount of paths in some of them. The first one, or the first 2, are pretty simple, but Around stage 3, they could get kind of open-ended as to where you want to go. Mind you, you're always heading to the right, so there's not much variation overall. So, yeah. Whenever you see a good amount of these little bars, chances are there's either some crystals over there or some candy. You're gonna want to keep your flight meter up to the top, because otherwise, well, that's a death, plain and simple. Obviously, the 10-ton weights just drop you down, but you're gonna want to be careful whenever you have to go down a hill, a cliff, go off a cliff like that, because more often than not, there's gonna be a bottomless pit at the bottom of that, and that's gonna suck, because that's a lost life. And I'm not entirely... I forget exactly how game overs work in this game. I'm not sure if you have continues. I don't believe so. I think you have to start over from the beginning of the game. I believe, at least. And obviously, you saw a bit earlier, there are 1-up markers you can grab just to get a 1-up, but they're not really that important. Either way, time for the first boss, Focke-Wulf the Wolf. That's actually the same name as the one mech from Mega Man Legends. And here's how boss fights work. Spam your ring at them, and if you put your ring directly over them by flying on top of them, you can throw them. Focke-Wulf just likes to throw some bombs at you, that's about it. Really, all the bosses in this game are pathetically easy, and almost are just variations on the same pattern. You defeat them all the same way, too. Some bosses are a bit trickier than others just based off the terrain, but honestly, overall, it's still not very annoying. Though Focke-Wulf's name is actually a reference to something, it's based off the Focke-Wulf FW-190, which is a German World War II aircraft. And I missed the name of this stage, but it's a mine stage, so it's pretty simple. The minecarts are actually faster than flying, albeit I don't think they're as fast as your maximum flight speed. But you gotta want to be careful because sometimes they actually do have them over bottomless pits, which would suck. And that's the new enemy I know for a fact gets introduced here, that little skeleton guy you saw explode down there. The way they work is that once you're within a certain proximity, they jump up into the air and explode into bones in all the normal 8 directions. Or is it? Yeah, it's 8. Or is it 10? They explode in a lot of ways. And that can be a bit annoying, because more often than not, when you get hit by them, you're probably trying to avoid them. And you're probably flying under them, causing you to get hit. And if you get hit too close to the ground, that's basically a death. There's basically no way around it. Though, admittedly, this game at least does have some amount of invincibility frames. They're very short. You only get them after you recover from a hit. But it does allow you to not hit walls, or at least be a bit more generous with corners. Though the invincibility power-up does allow you to avoid walls, or at least not... You bounce off them, essentially. Not that the invincibility counters are that rare in the game. Mind you, I think there's at least probably 1 per stage. And if you're good, you can get at least 2 in one instance, I know for a fact. But seriously, what is the point of that invincibility? That might just be the shortest invincibility power-up I have ever seen. The worst parts of the game are, honestly, these sections where the balls just start erupting out of the wall, because obviously these things come out in individual tiles, and I believe the game counts Tails as being too tall and too across. So if you're not careful, that can be dangerous. Though I'm not sure if Tails counts as a hitbox. I've always been a bit vague on that. Mind you, it's not that this is a game I go back to often. Honestly, this is probably the 3rd time I've played the game since I first played it. Because this game is not horrible, but there's better things to play in the Game Gear. Although these plants are kind of annoying. They grab your ring and cause you to be unable to move for a bit. Same with the dinosaurs. They'll hook onto your ring and cause you to move slower. Though I think actually the plants are a stage exclusive enemy. Huh. Also, it's weird. The stage's theme changes halfway through, both in terms of musically and visually, because now we're in some sort of Lego castle. Also, fun fact about the spike balls, you can actually switch the direction by hitting the thing. You've seen those little blocks there a few times before. If you hit the yellow one, all the blue ones are destroyed simultaneously, so always try to aim for the yellow one. Though I'll give this game credit, the ring controls fairly well. If you hold up and to the right, it will go up to the right at almost the exact angle you want. Though I wouldn't be surprised if what's actually happening is that it has a bit of homing capability. But I'm not entirely sure about that. Really, as long as you mash the button, most enemies shouldn't stand most chance, because you can destroy a good amount of projectiles that enemies shoot out. So, enemies aren't really threatening aside from boss fights, and even then, you see what they can do. Either way, next boss fight is Behringer the Bear, and he's basically the exact same thing. His attack pattern is almost the exact same as Focke-Wulf's, only a bit more erratic. He fires a bit more frequently, and he moves in a much more unpredictable fashion. Like with the last fight, don't stay too close to the ground, because if you get hit, that's probably a likely death, and that's no good. Though for some reason, whenever I think about this game, Behringer's sprite sticks out of my mind. I don't exactly know why, though. Maybe it's because a lot of the boss fights in this game have really weird proportions to their sprites. Even for Sonic characters. Like, look how large Behringer's head is. It's weird. And with that, we're on to the third stage, or fourth stage. Training area counts as one of the stages, that's right. Which is the second to last stage, by the way. Metal Island. This is probably my favorite level in the game because there's very few walls around you. Your entire wide open area just heading to the right, trying to avoid the little airships. And these birds are the worst enemy in the game, by the way, if you're not paying attention to them, because there's 3 of them and they each shoot a projectile. Which means that's a potential lot going on the screen. Really, though, there's nothing that's really particularly dangerous aside from them in this stage. It's fairly tame. Though this song does remind me, this game's soundtrack is catchy as hell. The weird thing about it, though, is that it doesn't really feel like Sonic music to me. I don't know why. Maybe it's because it sounds like it'd be a soundtrack to one of those kind of meh licensed games on the NES or something, one of those really kid-friendly ones that aren't very good. But I can't exactly put a pin on why. Though I can't tell... No, I think Tails' sprite is exclusive to this game. This exact version, because his sprite in Chaos and Triple Trouble was much smaller. Ooh, okay, that was close. I can't exactly pinpoint how the game detects your hitbox sometimes. I know for enemies and items and anything you can hook onto, it's the ring. But for Tails himself, I can't tell if it's his entire sprite or if it's just a block towards the bottom of it. Mind you, Game Gear probably wouldn't be surprising me if it's a giant rectangle that goes from about the bottom of his feet to about maybe where his pupils are. I wouldn't be surprised about that. Really though, like the previous stages, this level isn't that bad. The most dangerous thing about SkyPatrol, honestly, is the flight meter itself. Because there are times where if you're not getting candy, you'll have a long stretch without some, so you might be screwed. Thankfully, most of the levels are pretty generous about putting candy in places if you look hard enough, almost all over the map, so it shouldn't be that troublesome, but still. Though, for some reason, out of all the Game Gear games, this one looks the most like a Game Gear game to me. Also, I hate this robot right here. Let me go. Ah, damn it. Go, 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 go. You suck. I have never made it through those hoops all the way. Ah, well. I guess I'll find out when I play this game again in 8 years. I'm not actually going to play this game in 8 years. I doubt I'll even remember it exists in 8 years, honestly, because it's not very remarkable. Either way, time for what is probably the most annoying boss in the game, Karatia the Rabbit. Her pattern is yet again similar to the previous 2, only she actually has 2 different attacks. Those homing carrots, which will turn around and try to home in on you, obviously, and a kiss attack that you can knock back, because otherwise I think it stuns you or something. Either way, the fact that she has more attacks by default makes her the hardest boss in the game, and the fact that she moves pretty erratically, all things considered. But honestly, there's enough candy in this area, and since there's no walls, there's no real instant threat of death. The bosses in this game are pathetic. Mind you, I don't know what I should expect from a game that's only about 20 minutes long. And keep in mind, that's 20 minutes after not playing the game for about 3 years. Your first playthrough, if you're getting game overs, might take you an hour at most. But if you're good at the game, this game should be no longer than 23 minutes. And welcome to Dark Castle, the final level in the game. And it's also, I believe, the longest. Which, you know, it should be, it's the last level. And this place has the most unique enemies, and a lot of, there's actually a good amount of stuff going on here that tries to kill you. Walls all over the place, a good amount of enemies that are just trying to shoot you down to the ground. And honestly, it is the most dangerous level in the game, however, it's still pretty easy. This game's actually pretty generous with checkpoints too, all things considered, so you shouldn't be in a bad position for your, like, minutes away from a checkpoint at a time. And also, I hate this section. Rush through it. Oh, God, I'm surprised I made it out of there. Though I love the background in this stage right here. It reminds me a bit of a mix of, for some reason, Pulse Man and Mega Man and Bass. Oh, God, that was close. Love the song here, too. And that's the thing, that actually counts as an enemy, not a wall, which I was very thankful to learn, though. The biggest part of this game, I guess, where the difficulty could come from is trial and error, trying to learn what paths are faster and less dangerous, and how to avoid the obstacles within them. But you know, not the worst way to make game design go. I still think complete randomness is that, but trial and error only can go so far before it gets really annoying. Heck, that's what made a lot of NES games long, was just trying to figure out what to do. Though I'm trying to think about it, this isn't the last time Tails would be armed with a ring-type weapon. As much as I hate to mention the game, Sonic 06 would later give him ring bombs, so, Though thinking about it, giving Tails a long-range weapon could be a decent way to distance him from being more than just a Sonic who can fly. And you can tell Sega's tried to do that in the past. That's why he got stuff like the ring bomb and such in the first place, so they could try to make him a bit more of an interesting character to play as. But more often than not, it just doesn't work. Honestly, I think the best Tails we've gotten out of the side of the 2D games is Sonic Adventure 1. Because he plays well, but he doesn't have anything that gets in the way. Albeit I wish he had more original stages, but can't win them all. Either way, time for the final boss, Wendy Witchcart herself, and she is the final boss for Region. She is the hardest, because there's a lot more area around that you can hit. Because she's constantly on a cart, that means that there's always a good portion of the screen you cannot touch, otherwise you will die. However, her pattern is still pretty simple. She stays along the cart, so her path is predictable. She'll do little mini hops every now and then and try to throw bombs into you. That's about it. Though this is probably the easiest boss to throw into walls, though I'm not sure if throwing does extra damage. I won't be surprised if maybe it does about the equivalent of 2 to 3 swings, but I have no way of really testing that, because you can't really do that to normal enemies. Oh god. Really though, this boss, as you may be able to figure, easy. As is the entire game. And that's Tails SkyPatrol! It's a spin-off. We have stopped Wendy Witchcart from her evil deeds, and where the hell was Dr. Robotnik during all that? Actually, yeah, think about it. This is one of the rare games where there's no mention to Robotnik at all. I mean, I think even Tails Adventure, which is the next game I'm doing, by the way, has at least one mention to him, I think. And Sonic and the Black Knight, for him not actually being in the game, there's at least a little treasure you can find that has his logo on it, so, Either way, yeah, that's Tails SkyPatrol. It's a spin-off, and you can tell. However, it's not that bad. It plays well, and it's pretty short, too, so it's nice for playing on a short ride, or the shitter, I suppose. The only real thing I can say about it, though, that's worth going back to is the soundtrack, because while it looks good, there's not really much to do here. You play it once, and you probably never go back to it again. I guess, overall, it's pretty harmless, but there are better Sonic games or even Tails games to play, like the next one I mentioned earlier. Next up is Tails Adventure, and I'm looking forward to that, because I haven't played that game in about 5 years. So, what, 80? Oh boy. Yeah, that's actually a weird thing. Almost every single person in these credits goes by a nickname for some reason, as if they never wanted to be associated by it. I think people have slowly been able to figure out who some of these people are over the years, but I'm not entirely sure about that. Oh yeah, there's one more thing I forgot to mention. There's at least one cheat code in the game. When you're at the title screen, hold up 2 and then press start. Then you can access an option screen which allows you to which is basically a combination of a level select and a sound test. It's just kind of there. Overall, Tails SkyPatrol, I'd avoid it if you can, but if you want to play it, it's there. But with that, I'm going to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching this one-off game. Have a great night, and take care, and I'll see you guys over in Tails Adventure. See you guys then!